Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel, I'm For Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today what I do have in it is Chronos Before the Ashes, a game developed by Gunfire Games and it is using Unreal Engine 4. Gunfire Games, in case you don't know these guys were the developers behind Darksiders 3, also the definitive edition of Darksiders 2, and now the most recent one, Remnant from the Ashes. And well, this game it is Chronos Before the Ashes, so it seems like a pre-sequel to the game, right? Alright, so this game, despite it is using Unreal Engine 4, it isn't really pushing that much on the graphics, so it's easy to run. So my recommended settings for this game, if you want to target 60 frames per second, it is just to use 720p and use the median settings. And for me, it does look pretty good that way. So looking to the minimum requirements, these guys ask for an i5 from the 4000 generation, easy, 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is not much nowadays, and they also ask for a GTX 660 or an AMD Radeon R7 370. Well, in this case, the MX130 is not a better card though, but still, the results speak from themselves. 720p using median settings provided me an experience over 60 frames per second all the time on the place that I've decided to test. So absolutely smooth. While high settings and maximum settings, despite the average was above 60 frames per second, half of the time it was below 60. So it's a good experience if you want a balanced performance between the 30s and the 60s. So for 900p, all the settings did drop from 60 frames per second, alright? And the maximum settings did drop 83%, the high settings did drop 77%, while the median settings it is way more consistent and only dropped 38%. The maximum settings and the high settings are very close to each other in performance, and well, that's about it. They do provide an experience above 30 frames per second with no drops. As for 1080p, median settings, 1080p provides an experience above 30 frames per second with no drops. Alright, so it's a good thing if you want to have a good experience above 30 only, but if you decide to go with 1080p, it might start to drop under 30 frames per second. Alright, so wrapping all these results together, if you want to have a perfect 60 frames per second, just go with 720p, do use median settings please. If you want an experience somewhat in between 30 to 60, you can go from 720p high settings, maximum settings, 900p median high, maximum, or 1080p median. And if you want 30 frames per second having drops, just go with 1080p high settings or maximum, which I don't recommend. For me, I feel much more comfortable playing at 60 frames per second, and that's why I decided to go with 720p median. The difference in graphics between median or high or maximum in this game are very small, almost unnoticeable. So my recommendation it is, if you want these 60 frames per second, play at median, because the high or ultra doesn't worth the extra performance. Although if you want to try low settings or something like that, it does look bad. So I can't really recommend you to play at low and use resolution scaling if you want to drop down the resolution and try to play at median, because low on this game looks buggy and doesn't look right by any means, especially on the shadows. Alright, so I think that's all that I want to talk about the performance and settings and graphics, and let's now talk a little bit about the game itself. Chronos Before the Ashes, it's a Souls-like game, and it's still some elements from Dark Souls. It is a little bit more clunky though, so this might be a little bit disappointing in that regard. People say that the game it is super clunky, but I feel that most people are exaggerating a bit, unless forward into the game it gets worse. I don't really know. One of the top features of the game, and this is the selling point of this game, I can't stress this enough, this is the major selling point of this game. It is the character's age. I mean, you start your character with 18 years old, and every time you die inside the game, your character gets older by 1 year. So you start the game with 18 years old, you just died, and then when you restart, you get your character with 19 years old. So your character gets old every time you die. Good luck with that. At first, I thought this was a bad thing, but in case of this game, it actually is a good thing, because the older you get, the more access to skills and stuff to the character you get. At first, it is easy to evolve agility and strength because you are, you know, a young boy, but the older you get, the harder it gets to evolve agility, and the game tries to force you to make you learn arcane because you are now older and wiser, and obviously you don't get, it is not easier to get agility evolved. I think it's an interesting concept and something really unique, but honestly I haven't seen people very enthusiastic about this, and in my honest opinion, I think it could be implemented in a much better way though. The game also features some interesting puzzles inside the game, but according to some users, after mid-game they just drag and start to become something like boring fetch quests. Although at start they are pretty good, and it's a good fresh air to the genre. As for the maps, they aren't really inspiring at all, and I'm not really talking about the graphics. This game, it isn't pushing the graphics that much. They don't make usage of high-end features from Unreal Engine 4, and I'm absolutely fine with that 100%. The thing is, the art style of the maps, they are not really memorable. They are just a bunch of corridors with some details, and well, that's pretty much about it. The game story, if you don't like the gameplay, might be what really keeps you inside the game, but above all, to not spoil you, this is a prequel from the Remnant game. And well, the objective, it is really just to kill a dragon. Essentially, the dragon, it is summoning monsters, and that's about it. You go and kill the dragon, and that's it. That's mainly the story. Of course, there will be a ton of lore and details inside the game, but I can't really tell you about it. Still, I do enjoy the game. It's not the best Souls game out there, for sure, but at least it is not a straight copy. It has some nice puzzles, the age mechanic, it's very lightweight and optimized, so if you have an old hardware you can really run it, as you saw on my videos. And it's not totally expensive. You can get it by the time of this video for $29.99, so it's not cheap and not expensive. I think it's a good price. Metacritic, it is also around 72, so it's rather acceptable. But Steam community have a very mixed feeling about the game, because, you know, there is a thing about this game. Chronos Before the Ashes, it is not exactly a new game. It is actually a port from the original Chronos, which was released like 3 or 4 years ago. And this game was specifically made for VR. So the fact that you are buying a game that it is non-VR and it's a port from a VR game with 40 years old, I mean, and they are charging you $29.99 for a game with 40 years old, which was not specifically done for this. I mean, it's a little bit complicated to recommend. And I think that for some part, some people are complaining about that. But the other part, it is really the uninspiring combat, the uninspired enemies, and the maps overall. And the fact that some people complain a little bit about the combat gameplay, they don't like it. For me, it was fine though, but I do understand that it is not at the same level as a Dark Souls, for example. So if you played Remnant recently, this will feel like a very big step back for you in that regard, alright? So I think that's all that I want to talk about Chronos Before the Ashes. Hope you keep enjoying the rest of the gameplay, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
So far from one's homeland. What brings an outsider to these forsaken halls? Destroy the dragon. 'Tis a fool's errand, especially in the wake of the woeful encounter between the king and the Cyclops. You may as well throw yourself upon your blade. Listen here, Paleskin. Those blasphemous priests took my most valuable piece and used it to build a false Cyclops. Sheerest idolatry. But the vile, cursed golem they created is too powerful for me to challenge. Although, if you were to retrieve the golem's eye for me, I would use it to form a weapon I would give to you freely.
Ugh.